Welcome to Solar Works for Illinois. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today we are breaking down the Illinois solar industry with an industry update, 10 things you want to know with Brian Haug and Lesley McCain. I'm so excited to have my very esteemed colleagues with me today on Solar Works for Illinois. As I mentioned, we have two guest speakers today, Brian Haug, Director of Energy Solutions at Continental Electrical. Continental is the largest solar installer here in Illinois. We've done over 75 projects, and Brian has overseen 25 megawatts of commercial, industrial, and small utility scale solar. Lesley McCain is our other guest. She is the Executive Director of ISEA and also a solar veteran. She's served as Executive Director since 2012. And before that on the ISEA board since 2009. Prior to that, she was the Community Energy Inc. Midwest Director of Business Development. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and welcome to our guests, Brian and Lesley. I wanted to kick off the webinar with each of you introducing yourselves. We'll start with you, Brian, and I forgot to mention that Brian is also the board president of ISEA, so he's very involved in the solar industry here at all levels. So Brian, how did you get into solar and what brought you to ISEA?
Great, thanks Tim. I appreciate you having me on, and as well as having Lesley on. So like Tim said, I'm the Director of Energy Solutions here at Continental Electric. We are a full-scale or full-service electrical contractor, been in business for 107 years. We run about between 400 and 500 electricians in the field every day, predominantly in the northern part of the state. But I run our Energy Solutions division, and we got into solar, well, actually we got into energy efficiency back in 2011 when ComEd was putting a lot of incentives into energy efficiency. So we were doing a lot of lighting retrofits and lighting control. And then as solar has, as we like to refer to solar in Illinois, the solar coaster, as it would ebb and flow, we would stick our toe in and do a few solar projects here and there. And then the market would retract and we'd focus on other energy efficiency things. But now that Future Energy Jobs Act has taken place, we are full bore doing solar projects. And it's actually been a great boon to the market for to have Future Energy Jobs Act. So we've been doing solar for our first install was in 2009. We focus mainly on commercial and industrial projects and community solar, and we will talk here in the next hour about the need to continue with the incentives that are going that are in Illinois, and we need how we can expand those incentives.
Great, Lesley. Tell us, how did you come to ISEA, and how did you get interested in being the executive director?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Tim. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Tim, for your continued work to advance the industry through innovative ways like this Solar Works for Illinois opportunity. It's very impressive, and I think everybody really appreciates the events that can advance everybody's knowledge as to what the heck is happening in solar broadly. And I'm happy that today we're going to focus on the policy part of what makes development happen here in Illinois. And I also just want to mention, before I talk about myself, I just want to mention what a great opportunity it has been for the Illinois Solar Energy Association to have Brian Haug from Continental as our board president. I approached Brian in 2013 to be on our board of directors, and we were so happy to have somebody of his stature and knowledge be part of the organization. And I think this is your third year, right, Brian, of being board president? And his leadership is really critical to the advancement of the whole solar industry. So thanks, guys, for moving the needle. We appreciate it. So let's see here. Before I worked for ISEA, like it says on my bio, I worked for Community Energy They did the first wind project here in the state of Illinois. And so they were a wind developer out of Pennsylvania. And that was an interesting opportunity. I came from the golf industry. And so I just kind of had a crisis of consciousness that I couldn't add another left chest logo polo to the world. That was enough of that. And came home one day after being on the road and found Community Energy was hiring somebody as a program manager for the renewable energy program for the city of Naperville, and took that position, and then eventually worked into the Midwest Director of Business Development and was working nationally at that point. And I was asked to be on the board of ISEA. I think that was in 2006, perhaps 2007. And when we had the opportunity to hire an executive director, I was very interested in that opportunity because it meant that I could green my own grid. So I could work here in my state and ensure that that the energy that I'm currently using it becomes more sustainable and hopefully as time is revealing, even more affordable. And so I was very happy that that particular board at the time chose me to move from a board seat to the executive director position. And as I like to say about my job, it's really interesting. No 2 days is alike, and no 2 years certainly is alike. It's always a different set of work. And so this year, once again, we've been highly focused on legislation. ISEA has been for 40 years now, 45 years, excuse me, an American Solar Energy Society state chapter, which typically focuses on public education. We are also now a ISEA, Solar Energy Industries Association state affiliate, and that is a much more of a policy, of course, focus. So we've kind of switched our main focus from public education to policy, but we continue to advance both sides of the coin. So, but here again, you know, we're highly focused on policy because you can do all the education in the world, but unless you have good supportive policies for clean energy advancement and development, then we're doing nothing. So that's my elevator speech, Tim.
Great, thank you, Lesley. Thank you, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into the heart of the webinar, I just want to let people know that we have some great upcoming shows. At the end of this month, we have Nico Johnson. He is the founder of Suncast, where he regularly interviews solar executives and founders. So check out his podcast called Suncast on any podcast network. And then in June, we have Christian Roseland of PV Magazine. We're going to be breaking down the solar and storage friendly grid. And then in July, our good colleague from the Illinois market, Kevin Borgia, who has a long tradition in wind and now in solar with Cypress Creek Renewables. We're going to, this is a little play on words, but Path to 100, we're going to be talking about legislation and 7 steps to a clean energy future in Illinois. Today's agenda, we are going to give you some background. We have a wide variety of participants in the webinar today, from lay people to very seasoned solar developers and installers and professionals. So you'll have to forgive us if you already know some of this stuff, but I think it's good to set the table and give a background on the Illinois solar market. We're going to take a deep dive into the Path to 100. Because that is mission critical, and that is job one for the industry right now. And then if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about the future of the solar market, and you will see, of course, that lies on the shoulders of Path to 100, of course, and other legislation. And of course, we always do Q&A with our participants, so you can chat your questions into the chat at the top in the control panel, and I will read those off either as we accumulate them or at the end, just depending. So I love to start with a reminder that solar is super abundant in the United States. We consume 4.2 million gigawatt hours in the United States. So the small red circle here in the bottom right corner, that's our actual annual consumption of electricity. And then the big yellow circle, the big sun, that's the utility scale solar resource. So we have actually 70 times greater solar resource in the US than we have a demand. Elon Musk likes to point out that if you just took 10,000 square miles of southern New Mexico, you could produce all of our electricity with a 10,000 square mile solar array. That's 100 miles on a side. So we're looking at transforming 1% of the landscape. Some of our colleagues here in the Midwest are afraid that we're going to pave over the breadbasket with solar panels, and the reality is far from that. This is what the solar industry looks like historically. California is our oldest market, has been a market since the late 80s, but things really started to pick up nationally in 2010. And you see here Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, and New Jersey were some of the early breakaway states. Here in Illinois, Continental is an early adopter, as Brian mentioned, doing its first solar project back in '09. Really our largest, a sizable project in 2012. And now the true explosion of solar in Illinois. It's a very exciting time in the Illinois market with FIJA, and we're going to break that down for you all. So hold on. Now, nationally, of course, California is the leader, as I mentioned, 24,000 installed megawatts. Yes, that is a big number. Big dark state there. North Carolina is number 2 at 5,000 megawatts. So you see that the coasts were the early adopters. There are a variety of reasons for that, of course. California with the technology and innovation, but also the price of power. Illinoisans pay very little, less than a third of what our colleagues and friends and family on the coasts pay for power. And so solar and wind have been a little slow to come to the Midwest, but you see Minnesota is on the map now. Minnesota has about 1,200 megawatts of installed solar, so they're about 5 years ahead of us. But watch out, Minnesota, we are gunning for you. Another way to look at this, and this is a great interactive map that SEIA, the Solar Energy Industries Association, has. You can actually click on each of those dots and learn about what project that is. You'll see the cluster here in the Midwest is Minnesota. To our north, many community solar. These are 1 to 5 megawatt solar projects coming. Illinois, and I'm going to do a zoom in on Illinois, is a greenfield, right? We have about 200 megawatts today. And then the gorillas being in the Southwest and the West, the Florida, and then up the eastern seaboard, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, and the Carolinas. This is ultimately really about jobs. It's also about clean jobs and a clean energy future for the United States. And of course, this is a global phenomenon as well. But solar means real jobs. It is the fastest growing industry in the United States, bar none. And we already have 250,000 workers in the solar industry in the US. Little zoom in on Illinois. As I mentioned, it's a greenfield. That's very obvious. And that's a growth opportunity. So we are grabbing onto that. Some of the installed projects we have here in Illinois, the sizable ones, our largest is Grand Ridge Solar Farm. That's an Invenergy project in LaSalle County here in central Illinois. The Pullman Array on the south side of Chicago is a 10 megawatt single axis tracker that was installed in, 2012. Brian, correct me if or Brian or Lesley, correct me if I goof any of this up. But then we have a small utility scale project in Rockford. That's a fixed ground mount. U of I here in Champaign-Urbana, where I live, has a 5 megawatt, 20 acre solar farm on the South Farms. They're now planning a 11 or 12 megawatt solar farm too. Maggot Glove, and the projects highlighted in red are all Continental projects here. So Continental has built the 2 largest rooftop arrays in Illinois. That's why I work for Continental. I like doing large projects. I didn't get directly involved with those yet, but we're gunning for community solar and many CNI projects here in Illinois. And of course, we've done 3 IKEAs, the Joliet warehouse, and then the 2 retail stores, Bolingbrook and Schaumburg. Just real quick, I wanted to show some photographs of what we are talking about for anybody who really doesn't know what solar looks like. This is the Grand Ridge project. Wind in the background, solar in the foreground, and then there's also battery storage on this important Invenergy project in Streator, Illinois. By the way, we are going to be taking a tour there with Wickerson, that's the Will County Regional Sustainability Network, in July. So look for that news. We will post that on our website, and that's going to be fun. We're going to go behind the fence at the Grand Ridge Solar Farm. This is a 200 megawatt solar array that is planned for Champaign County. The developer is Baywa Re out of Southern California. That's a German company that is now operating in the US. And so this is what a utility scale solar array looks like. This is a 1,600 acre project that is going to start construction hopefully in 2020. I just wanted to show a photo of a single axis tracker. I didn't have a photo. I couldn't get a photo of the Pullman array, but I took some photos when I was in Colorado a couple years ago. So this is what a single axis tracker array looks like. If you go to Colorado or New Jersey or to California, of course, solar is everywhere. And so in 10 years, that's how it's going to be in Illinois. We're just scratching the surface. This is an aerial photo of the U of I solar farm. That's a 20 acre, 5 megawatt project. So this is very analogous to what is coming to Illinois with the 100 community solar projects that have now been awarded RECs. That's 200 megawatts. These are mostly 2 or 2+2 megawatt solar arrays. And then you see a close-up of the, this is a fixed ground mount, and there's a shot of the transformer. And just to any of the doubters out there who are worried about noise or things like that, inverters do not run at night, so don't worry about noise with solar. Background noise is much louder than a solar array. This is Solar Farm 2 at the U of I. Just wanted to show a quick layout of what that looks like, and that is a 50 acre project. And then a small C&I ground mount that we're just completing in northern Kane County in northern Illinois. This is a 350 kW ground mount. We're going to see hundreds of these small C&I ground mount and rooftops. And of course, you don't get to see the rooftop arrays, so it's nice that we're also doing some ground mount now in Illinois. Why do we have this rapid growth going on in the Illinois market? And Brian and Lesley are the experts on this, but I just wanted to say a little bit about the Future Energy Jobs Act, and Brian can chime in here too. So we got an RPS of 25% renewable power by 2025 back in 2008. And then there was a funding mechanism to spur that growth, and that takes the form of RECs, renewable energy credits, but the funding mechanism was inconsistent, and it was quote unquote broken. So we were not achieving our goal of hitting 25% renewable power by 2025, and that's where FEJA came into play. Thanks to our colleagues. Thank you to Lesley and Brian and ISEA, for working on FEJA for several years, and then that went in. Well, that was signed in December of 2016, and then came into force in 2017. But we're just now really seeing the first RECs coming onto the market now in 2019. But this is going to add 2,800 megawatts at least of solar and 1,350 megawatts of wind. So it is major job growth. It also has carve-outs for job training. It has carve-outs for low income. It's called the Illinois Solar for All program. And these are 15-year REC contracts generally paid out on an accelerated schedule, which is how the ROI is so fast. This is kind of how it breaks down. For the overall, we're going to have about 40% utility scale, and then 50% DG, which includes residential, community solar, and commercial C&I. And then there's a 25% discretionary block there. And then a very small brownfield carve-out. I wish that brownfield carve-out was bigger. I have a personal history with landfills. My dad is a landfill expert, so it's great to repurpose brownfields as solar farms. And then the DG market, which is 666 megawatts at first flush here, broken down evenly between residential, community, discretionary, and C&I. And a lot of the discretionary is going to the C&I and a little bit to community solar. But really nice 666 megawatts. Compare that to our existing 200 megawatts. So we're really taking a rocket ship ride. With that, I want to hand it off to Lesley and Brian to introduce us to the Path to 100.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Okay, we can probably look at the next slide, if we could. Okay. Oh, I get to talk about ISEA, my favorite subject. I've already kind of given a little bit of a commercial for ISEA, but our mission, as you can see, is to educate and advocate for solar and then other clean energies to the people here in Illinois. We've been around since 1975. Really started as an all-volunteer organization, and was that for quite a while. We've been a 501c3 charitable organization. We've just, as you can see at the bottom of this slide, we've just started an industry association, so a C6. The difference between those types of nonprofits is that C3, as I had said, is typically focused on education opportunities, but the C6 can work to move legislation forward. And we thought that seeing the industry in Illinois grow, that it was important that the organization also grew along with them. We have about 500 members. 350 of them are residents, homeowners, people that just want to see, some of them have solar, some of them don't. They just want to see solar and clean energy grow in our state. So they throw us a little money every year, and then the rest are our businesses as well as support services. I do want to say that ISEA business membership has quadrupled since the passage of the Future Energy Jobs Act at the end of 2016. So we do have a number of energy bills that were introduced this legislative session. And if anybody's not aware, legislative session begins in mid-January and goes through May 31st. So here at the very top left-hand corner, this is the Clean Jobs Coalition Vision Bill. The Clean Jobs Coalition, if you're not familiar, is made up of, I'm sure, well over, I think it's over 75 individual organizations that just want to, that touch energy in any way. So they're all nonprofits. You've got the big dogs like Sierra Club and NRDC, and then you have smaller environmental justice organizations. So the Vision Bill coming out of the CJC is broad. It includes electrification of the transportation sector, as well as advancement of renewable energy, and does have a big job and equity focus. The industry organizations are supportive of the visions in that bill, and who wouldn't be happy with 100% renewable energy in our state by 2050? That, I think, is a great goal. But the next bill, Path to 100 Act, is the industry's bill, and we're laser focused on this. So although we support the long-term visions in the Advocates bill, this piece of legislation, Path to 100, is meant to fix the near-term budget crisis that we are currently experiencing here in Illinois, very surprisingly. And also has some technical fixes, and we'll be talking a lot more about that in this presentation. Top right-hand side, Exelon sees an opportunity for capacity market reform here in Illinois, and that seems to be potentially a viable opportunity. We are vetting that idea and to see if, in fact, there would be a way for renewables to play a part in capacity market, but it's a very complicated and convoluted subject, and is going to require quite a bit of vetting and discussion to determine whether that would work for renewable energy. Sierra Club at the bottom left is carrying a bill, this solar-ready construction. So that's a nice first step. A nice first step to mandating solar on new construction. This is just the framing out for it to be easy to install solar moving forward. and we appreciate them pushing that forward. ComEd, they're in the middle. Again, you guys probably read in the news, looking for an extension of their formula rates, and we will see what happens with that. And then bottom right, the solar for universities, just making it easier for universities to be able to finance their solar. That's being carried by the Environmental Law and Policy Center, our buddies there. So you can see there's a lot going on in energy in Springfield, a lot of interest from outside groups. There are actually a couple of other bills that have popped on since we put this slide out. Vistra would like to advance a coal to solar legislation, which is basically storage, money for storage on coal plants. And then NRG came out with a piece of legislation in the last couple of weeks. So lots of interest. As we know, in Springfield, the legislature is highly focused on ensuring that we actually have a workable budget in the state. So a lot of people floating on energy ideas. None of these other pieces of legislation, though, have a critical need. The one that needs to move as quickly as possible is the Path to 100 Act. So, Brian, I think you're going to talk about why we're introducing this legislation.
Right. So, as you can see, there is lots of legislation down in Springfield, and this is not uncommon. Back when we were trying to fix the RPS several years ago, there were several bills, and the legislators said, "You guys go back home and talk about this amongst yourselves. Come up with a bill that makes everybody happy, and then come back and talk to us." And that was ultimately the creation of the Future Energy Jobs Act. And like Tim said, the time frame between the Future Energy Jobs Act getting passed in 2016, ultimately taking effect in 2017, and then finally being implemented in 2019, which we just saw here in February, end of January, early February, the pent-up demand has been huge. And we've, in an effort to have, the pent-up demand has, in the 2 years, has allowed all these developers, which is a great thing, come from the East and the West Coast, as we saw from the maps where solar is very well developed, to move into the greenfield of Illinois. So we've had this huge demand. The RPS was fixed, and now we're trying to balance these boom-bust cycles that we've experienced in Illinois for so many years. And because of the demand and because of the way that the solar renewable energy credits, or SRECs, are paid out over a short period of time, over a 5-year period, the budget has become pretty much consumed by this demand. And we're facing a near-term crisis, like Lesley said, that we're going to continue on with our boom-bust cycles. So Governor Pritzker is very on board with 100% renewables, which we all know that there's no such thing. It's not possible to get to 100% renewables. We're on a path to that. So we're trying to grow the renewables and create jobs, but we all know that there's still going to be nuclear power plants and natural gas plants that are powering our base load. That technology will change over time, but we're trying to now introduce a significant amount of renewables, wind and solar, into the mix. So with all the bills that are down in Springfield right now, there's certainly room for compromise, and for a lot of these bills to come together and to fix both short-term and long-term needs in the energy market in Illinois. So everything from the short-term needs that we need for financing in order to keep this growth going, and then the long-term needs for capacity markets and for the future of energy storage with battery technology. But I just want to point out that it's so important for all these developers that have come from the coasts to be able to see the long-term vision. And the Illinois needs to make sure that long-term vision is clear, so that the developers don't if they can't see that there's incentives or potential projects that are going to be occurring in 2022, 2023, and 2024 and down the road, they're going to stop selling. They're going to find other markets. They're going to leave, and our market is going to dwindle, and the jobs are going to go with it. So, like any new market, we have to have that long runway in order to make sure that we have this continuous growth.
I'll just interject real quick that a mature market like California, on a sunny spring day now, they're achieving over 50% renewable, meaning wind and solar, on the grid. So it's totally doable for Illinois to have a much higher percentage of renewables on the grid.
And that's a perfect example. When we get to that level of saturation, the next step is battery storage. So, which is the last point here on the goals for the Future Energy or the Path to 100 Act that ISEA is focusing on. So, the items that are in the Path to 100, there are a few, truly FEJA is working. We are a testament to that. We will have hired in the next few months over 125 additional electricians to do installations for this summer. And we're just one contractor. I mean, there are hundreds of contractors that are doing this all across the state. So it is truly creating jobs. So we need to keep this momentum and have these predictable mechanisms like I talked about so the developers stay. The sales cycle for a solar array is very long. I mean, we're talking a year or two or three is not uncommon for a solar project to be thought of and then all the processes to take place. So we need to have that long runway. The current RPS has 25% renewables by 2025. We will not make that under the current financing mechanisms that we have. So we are expanding that through the Path to 100 to get 40% of renewables by 2030. So that, again, keeps us on that clear path. Boiling down the numbers, that 40% by 2030 adds 6 gigawatts of new utility scale solar, 6.5 gigawatts of wind, and then 7.5 gigawatts of distributed generation, residential, commercial, and community solar stuff. So these are substantial numbers. The dots that Tim showed on his United States map, we're going to have some big dots over the entire state of Illinois when Path to 100 gets enacted. And we're still focusing on. We'll show you a chart here in a minute. That we need to make sure that the jobs and the equity measures are continuing to grow in proportion to the increase in the RPS. So we will, the Path to 100, make sure that happens, that not only the jobs, the percentages of money going to each segment of solar and wind is growing, but also the job and equity jobs are also growing in proportion as well. And then, like I said, this Path to 100 starts the process to start studying how we're going to pair storage with solar and wind. It's already happening. Continental's already doing many of these projects, but this Path to 100 really gets a formal leap to get that moving forward.
Okay, I think it's my turn. So I do want to mention, just following up on something that Brian touched on, is the jobs. So Continental with over 100 new electricians out there, which is really exciting to hear. There was a report that came out of the Solar Foundation a little bit earlier this year that Illinois was one of the few states in the country in 2018 that added solar jobs. So we added 1,300 new solar jobs in anticipation of this legislation finally being rolled out. I say finally because it took 2 years to implement. So that's really exciting, and we don't want to be looking at that report in 2020 and saying, yeah, but then in the end of 2019 we had to lay people off. So let's keep that growth trajectory going. So this slide is just meant to make the case as to, why is the industry running their own legislation? Why aren't we currently combined with any of the other energy legislation happening in Springfield? It's really important that to demonstrate to legislators that the industry has arrived. We've been fledgling for a very long time, and as I said, ISEA business membership has quadrupled. We are here. We are here. We are robust. We are working, and we are now an entity unto ourselves, and we can move our own legislation forward, identify our own needs. Previous to this, we were much more hooked up with the advocates who helped pass the Future Energy Jobs Act, and we still appreciate those collaborations, but it's important that legislators understand that we are an industry here that are adding jobs and economic benefits to the state. Also that, we are our own subject matter experts. The policy advocates that the companies have brought here to Illinois to help advance legislation, bring experience from all over the country. They know what's happened in all of the different state markets and can bring that expertise here so that we can have lessons learned when we develop our own legislation. I think I'm going to skip to the last one because I think I spoke about the third one already. So equity is very important. We don't want this to be lip service. We want this to be reality. We want to be able to demonstrate that we have a diverse workforce. And so we're just going to kind of keep pounding that home. Our bill sponsor in the House, Representative Davis, is very interested in the equity conversation and will be helping to convene some near-term conversations as to how we can ensure a more diverse workforce without putting too heavy a burden on the industry. We don't want it to be punitive. We want it to be additive. Next slide, I think. Tim, this one's yours, I think.
Cool. So this is just a snapshot of how solar is unfolding in Illinois with, we have small DG, large DG. Large DG, I think, is qualified as 25 kW and up. And then community solar, which is 2 megawatt or up to 2 megawatts. For anybody who doesn't know, community solar is a shared array that can send power to a myriad of off-takers via virtual net metering. So you have a central array, which it creates economies of scale, and then feeding power to any resident or commercial user in that utilities district. And we have Groups A, which is Ameren, and then Group B, which is ComEd and Mid-American. These are the investor-owned utilities in Illinois. It's not that the cities, the munis, and co-ops aren't participating. That's just been a little slower to unfold. And I just heard the other day that is confirmed that, well, for the moment, they will be participating in the RECs. So that's great news for large swaths of rural Illinois and the munis that are dotted across Illinois.
And Tim, I just want to interject. It is just for the moment. There is some opportunities for the utilities to rebut some of the findings. So it's still not a final.
Like any solar market, there is tension between the solar and wind industries and the utilities who are, they have a built infrastructure that is entrenched in coal, nuclear, and natural gas, and they don't necessarily see solar and wind as their friend. But the truth is, and this is the thing that most people in America don't realize, we are going to triple the grid when we convert transportation to electrification. Okay, so we're going to convert all of our internal combustion engines to electric powered vehicles, including buses, trucks, trains, and so we have a huge need for the growth of the grid. So there's room for everybody.
So there's a lot of words on this slide, and I know that Tim, you make these available after the webinars are done, so you can log back in and read some of the these finer bullet points. But this is meant to annotate that the Path to 100 Act touches on many different fixes and expansion and aspects of solar and wind. So we're working not only on just the overall RPS, expanding the amount of money that's flowing into it so we can continue with this growth of the industry, but also fixing some of the issues that we ended up having because of the large interest that resulted in the adjustable block program having challenges. And God bless the IPA. They've done wonders on getting this program launched, and there weren't any fist fights that I saw at the lottery program. I did see some unhappy faces where that people that were in the lottery that didn't get any projects chosen. So I feel for those companies, because now that they've spent several years doing lots of hard work and education and going to community meetings and didn't end up with any projects. So we've got to fix the adjustable block program and how the money gets allocated and distributed to everybody across the state. So Path to 100 focuses on some of those things. There are some net metering caps and rebates that need to be a little bit tweaked. And just like I said, I appreciate the challenges that the IPA has had. The utilities have also had challenges. ComEd and Ameren have, I think they were told many times about the solar tsunami that was going to hit them, and they geared up very well for it. But just the sheer volume of interconnection agreements and all the studies that they have to go through, it's just been unbelievable for them, and they've done a yeoman's job as well. This Path to 100 helps try to clarify and simplify some of the challenges that the utilities have had in this boom. And then, like I mentioned, it does start the conversation for having studies done on how battery storage can continue to grow the market and work very well together, as Tim said, as we're continuing to grow how much electrification that we're going to see across the state.
And just to add a little bit to this, we have this $200 million a year that ratepayers are putting into central funds that are held by the utilities. That is what is fueling the renewable portfolio standard in Illinois, and those funds are then paid out to system owners via RECs, which are renewable energy credits. One REC is 1 megawatt hour of electricity. But it turns out that $200 million is inadequate, okay, to get us to 25%. The statistic that I've heard is it gets us to 17%. But so if Illinois is going to get to 40%, we need more money in that pot. And right now, those fees are not burdensome. They're on the order of 2% of a ratepayer's bill. And so one of the things about one of the elements of the path is let's raise that fee a little bit. There's some other fixes that need to happen to help the industry have a fair playing field, like the interconnections. That's really about leveling the playing field. But we just need a little more fuel on the fire. But as you saw from those graphs, that is really all it takes is a little bit of incentives, and then away you go and you have a real market. And every energy source on the grid is subsidized. Don't kid yourself about that. Look at the nuclear industry. It only exists because of underwriting from the United States government. Private insurance companies will not insure nuclear power plants. So every energy source needs subsidies.
So it's Lesley. I just wanted to speak to that slide a little bit more. There were a lot of words, and apparently we also have a lot of words about that slide. I mean, I do feel that when we look at that slide, it certainly looks like there are that it's a broad bill and that there are a lot of focuses. But really, there's two focuses. One is the budget that we keep hammering on is much needed. And then those other technical fixes. Now, those technical fixes could be potentially fixed in other realms, perhaps conversations in the IPA's long-term planning process, which they have the opportunity to redo every 2 years, so that will start happening this summer also, or potentially in a regulatory process. But we felt it would just be cleaner to have some of those issues and concerns identified in legislation. So I just wanted to point that out.
No, that's a great clarification, Lesley. It is all about laser focused on getting in the funding in the right spots at the right time, so we don't have this cliff that we're heading towards. Good clarification.
And then this slide just shows us where we are now, right? We have a goal of 10 million RECs on the market in 2020 from wind and solar, and then with the path to 100, we're going to, quadruple that and get to 45 million RECs from wind and solar. How that breaks down, as you've seen before, similar to FIJA, right? We've got some discretionary funds. We've got small DG, which is residential, which is very important. And I'll just add, the residential market is underserved from an installer perspective right now. There's still lots of RECs available. So if you're interested in putting solar on your roof, by all means, talk to an installer. You just go to illinoissolar.org. That's the ISEA website, and you can find a qualified installer, and away you go. The incentives make your payback period on the order of 5 years in Illinois. So it is a very generous incentive. And we also have the federal tax, the 30% ITC, which is stepping down at the end of 2019. So there is a little bit of an additional funding cliff happening on the federal landscape as well. Then we have large DG, community solar, IPA discretionary, and then utility scale at 40%. So it's a nice smattering. Oh, and I forgot brownfield. So you're going to see solar in all shapes and forms, and it's a good thing for Illinois and the Illinois economy.
Right, and people might be noticing that that's the exact same breakdown for the different market segments that was in the Future Energy Jobs Act. We felt it was working well there, and that's what we would come out with in this particular opportunity to ensure that all the different market segments continue to grow. Okay, and jobs and justice is me again. So, there is a piece of this legislation that increases the Solar for All funding 5 times for every year. Again, we want to demonstrate that the industry is true in its wording that we really do want to ensure that diverse market, and we want to advance programs and as well as procurements for incentivizing hiring. Like I said, we don't want it to be punitive. We want it to be additive and ensure that we're able to demonstrate our commitment to renewable energy for everybody. So, and I just want to mention that this is a separate funding mechanism. We want to ensure that that money cannot be swept or reduced by the legislature.
And Tim, remind us when the Solar for All program opens up.
May 15th, applications start being officially received. So if you have an Illinois Solar for All project, which I was talking to John Carson recently, it really boils down to the geography of the host of that project. Off-takers are important, but when the projects are rated in Illinois Solar for All, and I did do a webinar on this with Vito Greco, so look on our YouTube channel or look at seco.com/solar webinar, and you can see a recording of that. So that is a great opportunity for institutions that are serving low-income communities.
So we've been down to Springfield, Lesley. I'll point out that we've been down to Springfield 3 times this year already. The Illinois Solar Energy Association and our friends and our members and the developers that are all of our friends in solar. We've been down there 3 times and talking to legislators, educating them on what's happening, and we're going to go down again. So go take it over, Lesley.
We're going to go down again, absolutely. So, if people have not had the opportunity to lobby before, it's a very eye-opening experience. First of all, legislators love to hear from their constituents and others that are going to add value to their constituents and to their districts. So if the spirit moves you and you would like to try that, we would love to have you. I also, a couple of years ago when I lobbied for the first time, it was very eye-opening to me that legislators are not going home in the evening and Googling the questions that they have about the many things that people bring to them every day, all day. They are really dependent on the information that we bring to them. And so if we don't tell them, they don't know, is basically how it is. So I'm going to start the last bullet. So we are going down again on May 22nd. So as I mentioned, the session ends on the 31st. We're not going to go that very last week where we think there, could probably be a lot of activity. We'll go the week before. We are we're working to be focused this time on the jobs message and all the trainings that are happening with the entities who received funding through the Future Energy Jobs Act that are out there doing the trainings. We will have the big IBW 134 solar semi there and some food trucks. So it should be really interesting and have like a nice springtime feel to it. But we will also be going into legislators' offices and ensuring that they are well aware of where the industry is headed and what is happening in their districts. As I think many on the call today are aware that, we just had the lotteries, the IPA held the lotteries for community solar at least. We got a little over 100 projects through in the lottery throughout the state, but there are 807 projects that cannot move forward. And that's what we went down with this last time. And we're able to tell legislators what is happening in their districts, what is moving forward, but what is not moving forward and what is being left on the table. So there are other opportunities with ISEA as to how you can help move this important piece of legislation forward. And I hope that when Tim sends the follow-up, he could include my email address, and maybe, Tim, we could even add a few of the links. There's an opportunity to send, an easy letter online to your legislator and let them know what's happening. We also have an automatic opportunity where people can send letters to the editor in a very easy manner, and which would help advance legislators and others' knowledge of what the concern currently is. So maybe we can add some of those things to the follow-up so people can help move the needle if they are so moved.
Sure, absolutely, Lesley. We will include some links in your email in the and links to the recording and the slides. So we do get asked this question a lot. Do we record the webinars? We do, and we do post them on our website and on our YouTube channel, so they're widely available. Let's get into some Q&A. We do have several questions in the queue here. And so please do type in some questions. We have a few minutes left. So we really want to answer your questions to the extent possible. There's several questions about RECs. Are all the awarded SREC projects expected to be installed by the end of the year? Yes and no. Of course, for community solar, developers have 18 months once they sign a contract to turn on a solar project, and then they can also get an extension if need be. And then it's a 12-month clock on large DG. So yes, a lot of those are going to get built in 2019, but many of them are going to spill into 2020 and even potentially 2022. There are not a lot of RECs left. There are several questions about this regarding RECs, and maybe Brian and Lesley can weigh in on this. Is the SREC program on hold for any near-term DG projects? Who wants to take that?
It's a good question. We're not exactly sure where things are going to go from here. You know, the IPA has allocated the money. We're waiting to see which projects are truly going to move forward. As some projects, you know, there may be developers that have multiple projects and choose not to, you know, they may have gotten a lottery ticket and choose not to move forward on projects. So that money is going to continue to slide along to people that are on the list already. So that's going to, you know, move projects out further on their start dates and then of course when they have to go live. But right now, you know, there's still money going into the program, but it's a little unclear right now. And Lesley, maybe you can shed some light on it, exactly how the IPA's, what their direction is going to be.
No, I don't have the crystal ball about the IPA. Like you said, some of the projects may fall off. And so there will be those recs would then become available for other projects. But you know, I know the IPA has acknowledged publicly that, you know, we are hitting a budget shortfall in the near term. I mean, there will be small amounts of money that will be available in the near term years if we don't get this fixed, but very small. And certainly nothing that can sustain an industry.
Right. And what we're telling our customers, both Tim and myself, is, you know, go ahead and continue with your aspirations to put solar on your facility. Get everything done. Get your interconnection agreements into the utility. Continue to push forward, because you don't want to be caught behind the 8 ball. Should we get this legislation passed and everything is, you know, moves forward as we hope. So we are still, you know, pedal to the metal, trying to get more customers involved that want to get involved.
And just to you know, step back for a second, there are kind of 3 chunks to the Illinois solar program in general. There's the utility program, and that is a reverse auction. There's the DG and community solar program, and that is the heart of the lottery program that we've been talking about. That's 666 megawatts approximately of solar that has now been allocated. There really is a very limited access to those RECs now. I mean, the Ameren program was slightly oversubscribed, but then through the discretionary RECs, they were able to fill basically all of the projects that were in the queue. So we're going to get those 666 megawatts of DG. And then there's Illinois Solar for All, which is TBD. And it's very hard to put a megawatt number to that program, but it's $95 million or something like that. It's, you know, so it's complicated. I did go to Anthony Starr, who's the director of the IPA, and kudos to Anthony for running a program on with a very small staff. He's done a wonderful job. He's been, you know, extremely competent and patient. And we have a good foundation here in Illinois. There's just no doubt that we are going to have a good 5-year run here in Illinois. So developers, be patient with us. Get engaged with ISEA. Come to Springfield. It makes a big difference to develop a relationship with the politicians in Springfield who are, you know, grinding this out day in and day out and tackling the very complicated task of getting legislation across the finish line. We have a few other questions here. What policies can we borrow from other states that are advancing on solar to benefit solar energy in Illinois?
Well, like you said, Tim, the IPA has spent quite a bit of time talking with other states to help put our program together. So I think a lot of the best practices have been implemented, but we can't not continue to look at these growing markets, like you said, in Minnesota and some of the others, and the more well-established markets, to see what, you know, how they changed their program after they first got started, because clearly ours needs to have some tweaking. I don't know specifically if there are other, because we only work, Continental only works in predominantly in Illinois right now. I'm not sure what other best practices there are in other states, but with our developers that are working in multiple states, I'm sure their best practice ideas are being passed along to Anthony and the IPA.
certainly we are borrowing, FEJA borrowed from the playbook of Massachusetts and New York and New Jersey. We're trying to learn from our forebears. And you see programs happening in New York State related to solar and storage. So yes, the answer is clearly yes. We are borrowing from best practices in other states, including Minnesota as well. Minnesota is really the shining star in community solar in the U.S. now. How accurate do you think ComEd's hosting capacity map is? I have no idea. Do either of you?
I do not.
No, I don't have that.
And there's a question about net metering. Net metering is, do we use net metering? The answer is yes, we have net metering in Illinois. It's retail net metering, the caveat being that if you're offsetting 100% of your load for, say, a commercial facility, and so during this peak of the summer, you're backfeeding onto the grid, those kWh are going to be net metered at wholesale rates, not full retail rates. So there's a little twist to net metering, but it is the foundation of any renewable energy market, to my knowledge. I'm sure there are other ways to kickstart a renewable energy market, but in the United States, net metering is the fundamental.
Hey, Tib, real quick, I know Lesley has another meeting she has to be at, so she's going to have to drop off. So,
no worries. Thank you very much, Lesley.
But I just wanted to say thank you again, Tim, for putting this together and continuing to press things forward. It's
yep, absolutely. Thank you. And
thanks, everybody.
You take care. And I'm just going to, I'm going to close out the webinar just with a quick reminder. We do this every month. This is a special month because we're doing it twice. We skipped April and pushed that into to May. But thank you so much to Brian Haug and Lesley McCain of the Illinois Solar Energy Association. Have a great association. We're grateful for all of our members. And thank you all for attending the webinar today and for watching the video on YouTube and wherever else it's available. So everybody have a great day. You take care, Brian.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.